Hey friends, Mr. Spitzer here, and we are already in week 10 of remote learning. And we're currently working in our fantasy writing unit, and we've done a lot of work so far in developing characters in our story and thinking about a setting for the fantasy story that we're writing. And last week, we were able to fill out a story mountain or a plot mountain or plot arc in order to plot the main points or events that are going to happen in our story. And that's going to be really useful in flash drafting today. So flash drafting means that we are going to quickly write our whole story. It doesn't need to be a perfect published final piece, but it should have all of the main events in your story and as much description as you can think of. So before I get started on the lesson today, I do want to go over some of the supports that are available to you, and I want to read the important message today. So I'm in my Google Classroom. I'm on week 10, 5/26, Tuesday, fantasy writing flash draft. And it says that today we're starting our fantasy flash drafting. This means we'll quickly write our whole story, and there are several options and things that can help you. The first thing that everyone needs to do is to pick a meeting time. So email me at kspitzer@mail.wagner167.org. So my email that you always email me at, and you're going to tell me what day this week and what time you would like to talk about your story. So while I have office hours from 10 to 11, you can pick a time during that time, or say you're available to talk at noon. You can send me an email. So it says, an example is, send me an email that says, "Hi, Mr. Spitzer, can we talk about my story at 12 o'clock on Tuesday?" So everyone needs to try to pick a meeting time or a time and a day this week that they're available to talk about their fantasy story. Step 2, it says that you should start writing your story as soon as possible. Now, flash drafting a whole story, it sounds overwhelming and it sounds like a lot, but I've read a lot of your ideas so far and people are doing a great job. So it says that if you don't know where to begin, try using Flipgrid and post a video of your story. It says you do not need to post a video, but sometimes this will help with your ideas, and it allows me to get a better understanding of your story. So if you want to use the Flipgrid link below and just talk about your fantasy story, that's going to be a really important and good step. Step 3 says the last idea and support to help you is the talk to text feature. And this is something we've talked about in the classroom a lot, but some people have forgot how to use it. So I want to demonstrate how to use that today. It says it can be useful when writing longer stories like this one, and I'm actually going to demonstrate how to do that now. So I went to my Google Documents. I am in my fake student account so that you can see, and I'm actually on lesson 6, the one that you completed on Thursday and Friday. And this story mountain is going to be extremely useful when we actually write about your story, when you flash draft your story. So right below that lesson is the flash drafting lesson. And our prompt today, our do now question says, why is flash drafting so important in the writing process? You can see that I already answered it, but I want you to do your best in answering this prompt. Why is flash drafting important? Why do I ask you to do it in all of our writing units? After you answer that question, we're going to look at our teaching point. Our teaching point today says that fantasy writers can take all of their ideas and flash draft one draft of their story, which means writing their whole story in one sitting. So that's what you're going to do today. It says that fantasy writers can take all of their ideas and flash draft one draft of their story. And flash drafting means you draft your whole story in one sitting. Some tips. Be sure to use your outline, the story mountain that you created, because that's going to remind you of the next important event that happens. Write as much as you can, but make sure to finish your whole story. So although I encourage you to use as much description as possible, make sure you get to the end, the conclusion, and wrap up your story. And it says it's a draft. It doesn't need to be perfect. So a lot of people, they stress and they focus so much on the little details in the beginning of their story that they never finish. So just make sure you finish your story, and then we can go back and edit and make revisions. So you're going to flash draft your story in that daily entry box, and you should draft your entire story in this box here. As you type, it's going to get bigger, so don't worry about spacing. There's some things that I want to remind you. I can type it out here, and then I want to show you some supports. The first thing is make sure that you're using complete sentences. That means punctuation at the end of your sentence, choosing capital letters when starting a sentence and when writing proper nouns. And I also want to encourage people to make sure they're using paragraphs. So hitting that enter or return key when the setting changes or when the timer or actions are changing. So if a big event happens and then your story switches to another location, just hit enter and create a new paragraph. I am not going to demonstrate right now me flash drafting my own story. I actually am pretty far in my story so far, and I will share that with you tomorrow. But I do want to talk again about how to talk to text or use that feature of talking to text. So you can see I'm in my Google Documents in my digital notebook, and we are going to go to Tools right here in the top of the toolbar right up here, and we're going to scroll down to voice typing. It says that if you also want to hit Control-Shift-S, that works too, but it's easier for me to come up to this Tools tab and go down to the voice typing part. When you do this, a microphone will appear on your screen, and I think a lot of people are familiar with this, but for those of you who don't use this feature, it's going to be really important to use. So all you do is click and you speak into your computer. There's some things that you need to consider when using this tool. When I click on this, it starts recording, and you can see that it types everything that I say, period. When doing this, you need to make sure that you are talking clearly and speaking loudly into your computer, period. That makes sure that this is as accurate as possible, period. Another thing that you notice is that sometimes it can make some errors, so you need to make sure that you reread as you're using this to type, period. It sounds funny, but you can see that I am stopping and saying the punctuation mark at the end of each of my sentences, period. If I do not say a punctuation mark to end a sentence, I will just have one very long run-on sentence, period. Another thing to consider is that when I'm using this voice typer, I'm not creating any new paragraphs. So you can see by my use, it's really effective to just talk out your ideas. But as I said, it's not creating new paragraphs. You notice that a lot of my sentences are not starting with capital letters. And that it sounded really funny to have to say period at the end of each of my sentences because I know that I need a punctuation mark after my complete thought. So if you decide to use this, make sure that you don't have just one really long run-on sentence, that you're creating new paragraphs when you talk about a new idea by hitting either enter or return. And make sure that you reread to make sure that the recorder picked up everything you were saying. Sometimes it does make silly errors and people don't check their work and then their sentences don't make sense. So this is a really good tool or feature for you to use to help you flash draft your story because you can just talk everything out loud and go back and type in other words. I'm going to delete that for now. The other thing that I had previously talked about that I do want to share with you is this idea of using Flipgrid to explain your story to me. So you can see here, it's our fantasy writing flash draft story, and it says, tell me your story with as much detail as possible and use sequencing words such as first, then, but, after. Try to use sensory details and as much description of the characters and setting as possible. So you can scroll down here and hit record response and just talk about your story with me. Tell me the setting, the characters, the problem in your story. And even if you want to go back up into lesson 6 and just talk out the main ideas or points from your story mountain, that's going to be really useful. Now, this is not going to be graded, but it will help you planning out your story, and it will give me a better understanding of your story so that I can help support you. So now it's time for you to actually scroll down to this box on lesson 7, our flash drafting, and begin writing your entire fantasy story. If you have any questions, please join my office hours from 10 to 11 o'clock or send me an email. Remember, the first step of our lesson today is making sure that you email me with a time so that we can talk about your fantasy writing story. I hope that you're enjoying this unit so far, and email me if you have any questions and to set up our scheduled appointment time. I hope to talk to you all soon.